PACchats, Professional Artist Chats. We're here with Professor Giordano today, and she's going to talk all about writing an artist resume. This is part 3 in our PACchats artist series, and the focus was to put together all the important pieces that you're asked for as an artist for different types of applications. For the Patchogue Arts Council, all of our opportunities always include and request these types of pieces of information, and so do grants, right? Exhibition opportunities. Basically, anytime you want to do something as an artist, you need all of these materials. So we are super grateful to Professor Giordano for putting together the awesome videos you've been watching. If you haven't been able to watch them yet, they're all archived on the PAC website, patchoguearts.org, or you can go back in our Facebook feed and see them. You can also see them on our YouTube. And we also have them translated into Spanish. So please share them with any artist that you think they'll be helpful. So let's get to today's session, which is the question and answer session for writing an artist resume. So hopefully some of our artists today have brought some questions for us. If you're watching live on Facebook, hi Facebook, please just pop your questions into the chat on Facebook, and I'll be going back and forth, and I'll get those questions for you and bring them to Professor Giordano to answer for us today. And just as a little reminder, you know, these videos are great for artists at any level. So even if you've been showing for a long time and you have all these pieces of information, your artist bio, statement, and resume, you could always use this to refresh it. If you're brand new and looking to start to exhibit more, then this is perfect for you as well, because now you need to develop that fresh. So we're just super happy that we can bring these to you, and we want to also thank the Patchogue Medford Library for partnering with us to make it possible. So without that, we'll get started. I'm reminding everybody we are on Facebook Live, so this is recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, you can just pop your video off. But otherwise, thanks for joining us. We like to see faces. And I have a couple of questions that are going to get us started. But before we get started, Professor Giordano, did you want to say anything?
I just want to say welcome to everyone who is with us today and watching on Facebook Live. Again, like you said, if you haven't watched the video, watch that, because there's a lot of great information on how to write the resume, which is kind of, like we said, the final in the 3-part series that Patchogue Arts Council and the library has been hosting, and again, covering how to write a good artist resume. So welcome, everybody. I look forward to hearing your questions.
All right, great. So today we're going to start with Professor Giordano's 3 major musts. Okay, musts for writing your artist resume. These are like the top 3 things you want to remember.
So top 3 things you want to remember is that when you're writing your resume, you want to, I talk about this in the video, having your most impressive achievements at the top of your resume. And again, in that video, I talk a lot about making categories. So in that video, it's kind of like categories of awards, scholarship, exhibitions, all of the kind of breaking things down in the right way and doing things in reverse chronological order. Okay, so you want to have your most important achievement at the top, but you also want to make sure that you are going in reverse chronological order, meaning that you want your most current experiences, opportunities, awards, etc. at the top of the list. Okay, so you're not like starting from scratch, like way back in the day, but it's most current to least current. The next really important thing that you want to think about is having absolutely no mistakes on your resume. And I can speak from experience here, because when I first graduated from undergraduate, and I did have an internship at an art gallery. I did work in an art gallery right out of graduation, but I was applying for another job at another art gallery. And my cover letter that went with my resume, I said that I was detailed oriented. That's wrong. It's detail oriented, right? So little things like that, making sure punctuation, titles of exhibitions are italicized. Everything is kind of really done with no grammatical errors or mistakes is a real must on your resume. Another thing to think about on your resume, which is a real must, is that everything is in the same font. You are no smaller than 10-point font. Okay, so usually like the standard is like 12-point because that's easy to read, but you may have to push it all, like you really want to compress it to get it onto one page. don't go smaller than 10 point. As a sidebar, if you feel like you want it to fit on one page and you are kind of really struggling with that 10 point, you can go in and adjust your margins. You don't have to have 1-inch margins all around. So I do this all the time. I always go to my margins and I make them really, really small so everything will fit on that one page. So think about your format and how clear it is so that, when that resume comes across someone's desk or on their laptop, visually, it's really easy to look at and really easy to digest. So I would say those are the 3 most important things that you are going to think about.
Okay, great. That brings me to the next question, which would be, and you started to talk about one of them, but what are the 3 the mistakes that you see that often happen, other than the one you mentioned about something like spelling or certain mistakes like the detail oriented?
Right. So don't save the best for last. This goes back to what I was just saying about your musts, right? Don't think like, oh, I had this great exhibition or this opportunity at MoMA and I'm going to save that till the end because it's like the grand finale. Do not do that. Do not save the best to last. Figure out how you can get your most impressive achievements to the top of your resume. Okay. So don't save the best for last. This is your time to brag. Okay. I know we're all trying to be really humble and we're not comfortable with that, but this is your time to brag. So don't save the best for last. Do not muddy up everything that you've done, right? So make sure that you are watching that video that was posted. And again, in that video, there's a list of 1 through 13 of different categories. Now, you might not have every category on your resume, right? You might not have an accomplishment in every single one of those categories, but you want to make sure that you are presenting the information like it's clearly marked awards, it's clearly marked residencies, it's clearly marked your education. So make sure you really have your categories really well marked and well chosen as well. Because a mistake is that everything is just kind of listed and it becomes like almost like gobbledygook, right? Do not have too much irrelevant information. So I had mentioned in that video, again, you kind of want to have your CV, your curriculum vitae, we call it, which can also just be like a marble notebook where you have literally everything listed that you have ever done. But on your resume, you are handpicking the most important information to present for whatever job that it is that you're applying for. So a big mistake is putting everything on the resume or thinking you have to put everything on the resume, and you really don't have to do that. You need to really be judicious in what you put on the resume for whatever it is you're applying for. So I hope that answers that question.
Definitely, that was perfect. So our next question addresses the idea of repetitive exhibits. So a lot of us participate in exhibits every year. Sometimes they're at the same venues. What are your best notes on including that in our resumes?
Okay, so again, you would have this exhibitions and then you would have everything listed. And again, kind of really leaning in on that idea of reverse chronological order. So when you're listing your exhibitions, if you find, Beth and I were speaking a while ago previously, and she had mentioned the East End Art Council, right? That might, maybe you show and you do something there every month, or you do something there every year, once a year. If you start with the title, then it's going to be really obvious to the viewer how many times you've been at the same venue. But if you start with the date, it's less obvious, because if you only do that once a year and you're starting with the date, then you can list 2 or 3 other things that you've done. And then the next year, in 2019, if you're there again, at least it's not one on top of the other. It's not like East End, East End, East End, but you're doing it by year. So that's one way to kind of break that up a little bit. Another way is you can leave things out, right? So if you're always showing at the same venue, but let's say your art happens to be particularly political in nature, and East End had an exhibition that is featuring the theme of very political art, then you want to make sure that you have that on your resume. So you can weed out things that don't really relate to your work if you feel like it's too repetitive, but making sure that you're keeping on the titles of the exhibitions that really underscore the way that what your work is about, rather. So that's how I would handle that.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's great. Our next question would be, actually, it's a more of a suggestion you might have. What if you're a younger artist and you're trying to write this resume, but this is one of the reasons why you're writing it, is to try to get more opportunities and exhibitions to add to your resume. So what can you suggest for a younger artist who's trying to build a resume that still looks fantastic and is looking for opportunities?
Right. So I think a good thing to do there is to, again, that list that's in that video, the 1 through 14, you might want to have more categories, right? Because if you're a more seasoned artist and you really want to kind of showcase your exhibitions, you have a lot of them, then that's going to really be the dominant category on your resume. But if you're new and you haven't done as much, then it's okay for you to have more categories with only 1 or 2 things within each category. Maybe it's volunteer work that's art related. Maybe it's mentoring that's art related. Maybe it's a mural that you volunteered to paint, right? So you want to have all of these things on your resume in a really clear way. Another example is in that, lecture that I gave, the last 3 slides rather, give specific examples of what a current resume should look like. So if you don't have a lot of material, make sure the layout of your resume is really eye-catching. Make sure you use the space well, right? You want to make sure that it's kind of really easy to look at and easy to read, but also kind of current and relatable. And you really obviously are going to stick to the 1-page resume, and that's okay. And that's okay if more educational experiences also dominate. And that might even be the first category, is your education and things that you did, exhibitions at school or volunteering at school, things like that.
That's perfect. And then I would just like to add, if you are a younger artist and you're looking for opportunities, one of the best ways to do that is to look at the different the Patchogue Arts Council, the East Ends Art Council, all your different arts councils that are in the area, because there's a lot of times juried exhibitions you can enter, and sometimes that kind of helps you get going, and it really helps other people see your work. So that's really important. My favorite resource is also NYFA. I'm always a NYFA advocate. And no matter where you are at in your artistic career, there's always opportunities. So the New York Foundation for the Arts has the artist classifieds, and you can always check that out. And they go through the opportunities so that they can kind of like weed out ones that maybe aren't the best to be including. So they're usually really substantial opportunities. There's also parts of their website that are wonderful for artist grants and resources. And if you're a teaching artist, it's another wonderful resource. I can never say enough good things about them. So make sure if you don't use them as a resource that you start using them as a resource, because they're really helpful. They even have a huge bank of past sort of talks just like this actually that are archived now that you can go back and watch too. So that's always great. So for our next question,
before we go to the next, I could just so for young artists, it's really important. And again, I'm a real big fan of a marble notebook. I don't know, I just write everything down. I'm a pen and paper person. If you're just starting out, write down every single thing that you've done, because when it comes to writing your resume, you want to have that record somewhere. And that doesn't have to be in any fancy format. It just has to be in a format that you understand. And the best example, one of the good examples that I like to give younger people, artists, or just younger people in general, is this. I have 3 kids, right? My 2 older ones have applied to college already. When it came time for them to sit down and basically write a resume, because you have to put a resume in when you apply for college now, right? And the application is almost just like a resume. They were kind of like, oh gosh, a little like their head was spinning. They're 17 years old. What have I done through high school? I just gave them the marble notebook that I had written everything down that they had done from freshman year. And it was like in marker, it was in pencil, it was nothing fancy, but it was literally everything. 2010, you did this. 2011, you did this. If you keep records like that of everything that you've done, when it's time for you to write an artist resume, you're going to have this great resource that you can pull from. So if you haven't started doing that, start doing that. It's just really good record keeping. And then as time goes on, you cross things off, but it's a really good thing to start doing for younger artists.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite must-dos, because
Yes, we should have included that in the must-do. Yes.
where it's a must-do. I'm guilty. I leave it. I still, even now, like, we'll do things all year. You forget to write them down.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh no, it's time to update this.
Right.
And you go crazy or you forget things. It's just more stressful than it needs to be. So the book is a best idea.
Like a pad like this, right?
Yeah,
like
literally.
somewhere that you have that you're just.
You can even keep it on your phone in notes.
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Right. Like really be current. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, great. Oh, so our next question, before we take questions from anybody out there, get them ready so that we can start funneling them to Professor Giacomo. Oh my gosh, I mean Professor Giordano. Names are too close. This next question is specifically for artists who have been showing a while. So now you're looking at refreshing the resume, and sometimes I look at resumes from artists that have been showing a really long time and they go back a really long time. So the question would be, what's the best practice right now that you think would be great for a seasoned artist to keep their resumes sort of shorter and to the point? How many years back should they really go?
Right. So I would say maybe good rule of thumb would be 10 years, I would say. You really want to look and edit things off of your resume that just are too far in the past, especially if it's a resume, right? A resume means it's shorter. A CV, curriculum vitae, like if you're applying for an academic job, you can go on for 3 pages. They're going to expect that. They're going to want to see everything you've done from the moment you graduated, but most resumes are not. So you can, if it's more than 10 years, you can just go ahead and take that off. Because chances are you have a lot more current things that you've done that you want to showcase.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. So those are the questions that I prepared that I thought would help us all. But now, do we have any questions from our artists out there? Anything specifically that might have come up in your own resume is when you're trying to rewrite them, or something after you watch the video? Just give everybody a minute.
Sure.
And I'm going to check our Facebook.
Okay.
And just see if anybody's got anything for us. I think sometimes the artist resume is one of the things that I get the most questions about from artists. Of the 3 pieces of information, sometimes it seems to be one that it's not always asked for. Sometimes it's like 3rd on the list. I have a question from Christoph, which is, do you recommend a resume or CV on showing an artist an artist website? So what is the best thing for an artist website? Or your preference or what you see happening?
The way that typically the rule of thumb with a CV is if it has to do with academia. So if this artist is also teaching, right, then you want to have a really long academic CV, and I think that would be appropriate on an artist's website. If you're not, I think I would narrow it down to a resume, but this is kind of a tricky question because I've seen both, and I actually just helped an artist on their website. As far as your exhibitions, include as much as you want on your website. Do you know what I mean? But you might want to shorten the other categories. So it's not like this really lengthy CV, but that it's more concise, but more focused on your resume, on your exhibitions. So I hope that makes sense. It's almost like be as lengthy as you want on your website when it comes to exhibitions, but you don't have to have every other detail, on your resume. It's just too much information.
Yeah, I think and I sometimes include both. Like I have an academic one as well as the artist one, and I've separated them. Yes. But I have one that's just like everything. And I've also seen sometimes on an artist website specifically where you can click and download the longer version.
Right.
So that could be helpful. Like if you want both on there, you could always just add it as something that, because someone who is interested in reading that more, they're going to download it. I feel like, so you might as well put it there kind of thing. And someone would click on it if they wanted more information anyway, which is
right. Right. That's a good way to kind of divide them both up. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, here comes, let me just let Mariah back in. Hi, Mariah, welcome back. Are there any other questions for Professor Giordano? You can pop them in the chat box, or actually I can also unmute you if you prefer to ask yourself. I have actually another question, and this isn't a question, but something actually Professor Giordano and I we were speaking about earlier when we were preparing. How do you feel about imagery and things like that included on the artist's CV? Do you think resume or CV? Do you think that should be?
I would say no. I would say don't include any pictures of yourself, any pictures, any graphics on your resume. Keep it really clean and neat. In that lecture, again, the last 3 slides, there are 3 examples. Not only are there 3 examples, but I also gave you a link in that lecture to free templates, right? So you can also follow along with those templates. And I would say keep your picture on LinkedIn, but do not put it on your resume. And also in that lecture, on the last page, I gave you some other resources like the College Art Association, Columbia University, and I think Chronicle of Higher Ed. They also kind of just reinstate all the things that I mentioned to you. And one thing they are consistent with is don't have a picture of yourself, right? Let it be that they're reading what you've done, they're seeing your accomplishments, and you don't want to distract from anything. You don't want to put somebody off by maybe like having a funny picture or anything that could perhaps be off-putting that might hurt you in the end. Yeah.
Even your artwork. So a lot of times artists, they apply to things. You want to show all of your artwork and you want to show more pictures than sometimes you're asked for.
Right.
Sometimes you'll put an image, I've seen it on a couple of things where artists will add images because they know we're looking at work, right? So they figure, well, number 4 didn't fit, so I'll put 4 on the resume.
Yeah.
But it really, I agree with Professor Giordano, it's more professional to not have that at all. Your submission of your visuals and your artwork is separate, and you want that to look as best as possible and stand out for your work. And then this is just supporting that.
I agree. It's something unprofessional about that.
Yeah.
And that's where, that's where LinkedIn is a great resource for you, because you can add the link to your website there. You can, and that's where you can kind of have almost like a visual attachment to a resume-like feature. But when you're submitting just a resume, just keep it clean and neat. And if I can comment here as well, sure. I mentioned this in the lecture, and this is really important to note, always having a document, have it saved as like a Microsoft document, and always having a PDF version, excuse me, and really making sure that you are sending it in the way that it's required, right? Because some places will say Microsoft Word only. So you want to have both versions always ready to go, that you can send either, and that you're sending the one that they're asking for. That's really important too.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And one of the things I've come across, and this is always good to keep in mind, because it always happens with a resume, because you have different kinds of formatting and things like that. You're trying to fit it to a template. Like if you're a Mac user, and I'm a Mac person, so I work on Pages a lot, and then you're saving in Word, and then you're saving the PDF. You're going back and forth, and sometimes you're doing these things fast. Make sure you check that document before you send it, because a lot of times when you change it to a format, especially between like Pages and Microsoft and back and forth again, it gets a little wonky or adds, weird bullet points. And
exactly.
I've had them come through really weird looking. I've done it by mistake myself just because I clicked the wrong file. And so it's always really good to double check it for a more professional application for anything.
That's a great point, because it can look beautiful on your computer screen, but then it can send where like all of your columns are kind of jockeyed over, or there's wide spaces between words, and saving it in a PDF normally will avoid all of that. But you have to really make sure that you're not submitting something that's been changed like that. Yeah.
Wonky on you. And then it reminded me of one other thing, and I don't know how much you've seen this, so maybe you can give us feedback on this. But since you can make live PDFs and things like that now, I've been doing it with my own resume, where I actually link. So when I'm talking about maybe any press, or if I know there's a website for a specific exhibit that I was in, or something about it, I link it to, I live link it in the PDF. Do you suggest that this is a good thing, or how do you feel about it?
It's tricky, because I was explaining to Beth that in one of the many hats that I wear, I have to review a lot of resumes of high school teachers who are looking to teach college level courses, college level studio courses. So these are artists who are art teachers and want to teach studio classes on a college level. And I review a lot of resumes, and I see that. And I see very often they'll include these links. it can work to your advantage if the link works, because I've clicked on some of those links to be like, oh, okay, let me see. This is something new. And if the URL doesn't go through, or it's more frustrating on my end, you know. So if you're going to do that, really make sure that it is live, that the link is connected properly.
Okay.
Because there have been a couple of times where I've clicked on it, like I said, and it's frustrating. And now I'm trying 2 or 3 times, or I'm trying in a different browser and it's still not opening. So, and I wouldn't have too many of them. You know, you don't want to have too many of these embedded links on your resume. Like, again, like what showcases you the absolute best, and that's the one that you're including.
Yeah, if it's like a small little picture in a newspaper, you know, those are exciting things, but maybe you want something that talks more about your work, or that's really going to aid in what they see.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
And we have a question from Facebook from Richard. And Richard says, some shows want a resume, some an artist statement. They're giving you a choice. Or they ask for the similar. Which one do you think an artist should use?
That's a really
That's tricky. That's a good question.
So the researcher in me, and I do this for every single thing that I apply to, I would research who are you sending this to, right? Like let's say it's an art gallery. What is the art gallery? What type of artists do they represent? On their art gallery website, do they have artist statements, artist bios, or do they show artist resumes? Because this is something, right?
Yes, it's a good research moment.
Exactly. And I would want to know, what are they looking at more often? And that's one of the benefits of the internet. Like, you can look up anything that you're applying for to get more information, to better yourself, to position yourself better in your application. So that would be my first thing. Do I see more bios on their websites? Do I see more artist resumes? The other thing that I would do is look at the artists that they are featuring. And actually look up those artists, and what showcases you, what puts you more in line with the type of artists that they feature. Does your statement, does your bio kind of put you more in that type of field with those artists, or do you feel like your resume will showcase you better for what, because they're looking for something very specific. Anytime something is open, an open call, they are specific. So you want to kind of find out as much as you can of what are they looking for, and then make that decision. It's tricky because if on your resume, if you've had again, I'm going to kind of go back to, let's say PS1 MoMA, let's say you've had something that you've done there with them, and that's on your resume and not in your bio, because they speak very differently, a resume and a bio, then submit the resume. You know, if you have some really strong name recognition things on your resume, submit that. If not, and your bio speaks more to your body of work, you have to really kind of go by what you're applying for. And I had that in my notes. I know this is a long answer, but one thing to think about is, no matter what you're applying for that's calling you to send a bio or a resume, print that off. Everything I apply for, I print it off, and I literally have that next to me while I'm sending in my application. So I can check off, that what I'm sending in matches up so much to what they're asking for. So I hope that answers that.
No, that's really great. And it also, so would you say it's true then, if you're printing, print, or you have next to you, you're working with the call exactly.
Yes.
They may be looking for certain things in that call. You could change your resume to fit that. So maybe certain categories have to move in that.
Yes. Thank you for reminding me of that, because this is really important to the person who asked that question and everyone. So again, if you're applying for something that is, more teacher oriented, that category education needs to be at the top.
Yeah.
If this is a call for an exhibition, then you need to have your exhibitions right at the top. Or if there's an award that you won that specifically relates to that open call, put your awards up top. So you want to definitely always be moving things around. I have like 5 different versions of my resume.
I do have many. I
Yeah.
redo it, and I've only started to do it recently in the past couple years, but I redo the resume every time I'm asked for it, or I'm submitting it for something specific to do. Like you said, I move categories around, and one of the ones that I've helped other artists with are for like residencies. And so a lot of time they always say once you get a residency, it's easier to get more.
Right.
Because they want to know how you act as a resident artist and things like that. But you're trying to get your first residency, so what do you do? And so I always suggest, things that are the closest type of experiences to a residency, which would be teaching, because a lot of times
I was just going to say that. Yep.
Yeah. So I always have them move that to the top, and so that's going to be less, because a residency is less about having an exhibition. It's more about how you're using and need that time. You can put education there. So I think what Professor Giordano just said to us about altering the resume to fit the situation is really important and could really help in the situation like Richard just asked us about, which, like, when you have a choice, which one do you give them?
Right.
Now I have a question.
Okay.
It made me think of in this situation where you're given a choice, you have to pick statement, bio, resume. Have you ever seen anybody make like a one-page document that's like, I want to say, a conglomeration of of all three? Because I've seen them, so I don't know.
So this is where and in that lecture that I gave, that's posted, right? The one that was posted.
That's posted.
That's posted. I mentioned something about including a short bio at the top of your resume. And there are examples. Again, those last 3 pages give you examples. And it cannot be a long bio. It has to be a really, really short bio. It has to be that it very much speaks to the position that you're applying to, right? Like whatever experience that you have, that like in 5 sentences, right? You're talking about like a 5-sentence bio at the top of a resume, definitely. And again, if you go back to that lecture, you can see how to format that. Or if you click on any of those templates, you can see there'll be a box up top where you can put that. So if you watch, it's a great question. And if you go back and you watch the lecture series on how to write an artist's bio, you're going to see that there's like 3 different versions. There's a short, there's a medium, there's a long. A resume bio is like super short, right? Like I said, like 5 sentences. And that can really work to your advantage, especially if you're really good with language and editing, and you can really kind of really connect your body of work to, let's say, that kind of like, that's like you being like me. I am the one who's best for this, in those few sentences, and then your resume. So, yes,
it's really tailored, even just that little part to them. It's
exactly
a little bit to add.
Exactly. Yeah. Not unheard of, and can really help you. Yeah.
And it won't look weird. It's a pretty normal thing to do.
It's pretty normal. It's normal. In fact, like I said, some of the examples I gave in that lecture have that. So, and there's even in that lecture, there's a page about writing a short bio for the top of your resume too. So.
I'm just going to check our Facebook for any other questions out there. Feel free to pop them in. Is anybody with us here on Zoom? Do you have any specific questions that have come up during our talk today? I'll give you a minute to chat box them there, or if you want to ask yourself, I can unmute you. We've got a lot of great information today. Thank you, Professor Giordano.
My pleasure. I hope it helps.
It's so great. Let's give everybody a minute. I'm trying to think myself of anything.
And I'm trying to think what's in it.
You covered everything.
It's covered a lot. Yeah, we covered.
One of my favorite things to do is resume stalking. So I've done it forever. One of my professors told me about it when I was in college. And that's one of the best things, like find other opportunities that you never knew about. Find artists, you have artists that you love. Look at their resume and see what, like, you can just work your tier up to the different types of opportunities that they've shown in that you might be looking for. Okay, here's a question. What are the big fat resume no-nos? Thank you, Christoph.
Yeah, good.
Big fat resume no-nos.
So again, like I look at a lot of resumes, and I will say this: while your resume should be really straightforward and well laid out, right? So if you open up, again, if you do nothing else, if you don't even listen to that whole lecture, but you open up the 3 examples, the last 3 slides, I really tried to find the most current, up-to-date formats, which is like a double column. Like you'll see resumes are very different now than they were maybe 10 years ago. So don't submit something that looks dated, right? Don't, because it is a visual document.
Big fat no.
It is a big, no, it's a visual document. I look at resumes, I'll go through like 5, and the ones like you were saying where the font isn't lined up or there's 2 different types of fonts, like before I've even read what the person has done, I have a bad taste in my mouth. I'm already kind of like, oh, they couldn't take the time to organize this in a better way, right? So remember, it's not your artwork which is visual, but it is a visual document that's coming across someone's desk. So make sure I think I even started that lecture with, it's like when you go into an interview and you prepare, right? You have a suit on, you have good shoes, or whatever it is, or your favorite outfit, you brush your hair a certain way, like
your power items.
Whatever your power items are, like that is your resume. So don't be sloppy about it. I would say that's a huge no-no. And then again, like if I look at a resume and it's just things that are listed, right? And there's no category division, that to me is a really big turnoff. Like I don't want to just know a checklist of everything that you've done. I want to know this is your education. These are the awards that you've received. These are the exhibitions where you've shown. These are the residencies that you've had. And again, reverse chronological order. I want to know your most current, most up-to-date thing that you've done. Don't start with an award that you received in 1992. I want to know what you did this year or last year or 2 years ago. So that's a big no-no. I would say also working in like not working in reverse chronological order, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
I've got one. So when let's talk about listing exhibitions, right? And when you're listing them, you can be in an exhibition that's juried. It could be invitational. It could be a group exhibit. Sometimes people are in juried exhibits and then they word them as group exhibits. What do you feel about those types of labels for exhibitions? Like, right. Could you say instead of a juried exhibition, is it better to say group? Is it better to say juried?
I think
the question we get.
Yeah. So that's another thing where I would spend the time like researching who are you applying this to and what is the language that they use, right? That's really important. Anything that you apply, right? Like I said, any job, I have gone on job interviews and I have looked up the person who's interviewing me. What is their background? Where did they go to school? Right? Like I want to know as much as I possibly can before I get into that space.
Absolutely.
So same thing with your resume. What's the language that they use? And if they're going with jury, then you use juried. If they're going with group, you go with group. In that lecture, I actually have one page where it's examples on how to use that type of language, right? So you want to have the date, and then you want to have solo exhibition, and then you want to have the title in italics, right? And then the state and the location as to where it was. Whatever language you come up with, make sure it's consistent. So if you have solo, if you have 2-person exhibition, if you have a group, if you have a faculty exhibition, make sure that like you're not using group and juried. Stick to whatever the 4 or 5 topics you're using. Just always use the same labels. Don't kind of throw in something new if you've kind of already said it in a different way. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. No, that's exactly what the answer I was trying to get to.
Okay, yeah. And one more thing about that too. If you go into that lecture and you open it, you can see it's like the date, and then in bold you can have solo exhibition, comma, the title of the exhibition in italics, comma, and then the city and state where it was, or the venue where it was. So you can go on that slide for the actual format for that too.
And that's really important. Professor Giordano put that together for you guys because we see a lot of resumes that come in, and that is one of the most common things that we see that is really sort of jumbled and hard to sort of wrap your head around is the listing of exhibits and how artists are doing that. It's not really like always that organized, and so the way that Professor Giordano has laid it out is really the best way that you would want to represent those. And then maybe you just want to, and I know the video will cover some of this too, but just in case some people are listening or didn't watch the video yet,
that's fine. That's
fine. So if you're a more seasoned artist, right, maybe would you take that exhibition column, would you break it up and maybe then do solo,
yes,
group, and so on? Or what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think you could definitely do that, because I think, like, listen, we all know that, like, the more solo exhibitions you have, the better, right? Like, this is like your prestige moment to kind of, your work is showcased. So if you have solo exhibition, again, reverse chronological order. Solo exhibitions, 2019, 2015, 2013, 2010, right? And then again, comma, the title of the exhibition, the city and state, or the venue. And then you can go into group exhibitions and you can list them reverse chronological order. And then what, any other kind of things maybe that you've done, you know, after that, like any other kind of, I don't know, maybe, I don't even know what you would do after that, right? Like you'd have like maybe solo,
Yeah.
2-person, and then group exhibition, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, we have a question from Mariah. And so she asks, is it important to describe the exhibition and what kind of artwork was shown? What are your notes about that?
So for me, as a person who reads through a lot of resumes, I'm a looker upper, and that's probably not the right way to say it, but
Researcher.
A researcher. That's probably a better way to say it. So no, I don't think that you need to say sculpture exhibition or painting exhibition. You don't need to say that, because what my responsibility is the person who's looking at the resume is, if you've given me proper information, I can Google that exhibition and I can find everything out. Mm-hmm. So your exhibition list, it's almost like a bibliography that you're giving whoever's reviewing that resume, right? So that's on the person who is reviewing the resume. For you to get really wordy and start describing it on your resume, that's not the place to do it. I don't think you need to do that. If there's a title of the exhibition, definitely include that. And I keep mentioning the venue. So let's say, I know when I first started as a young Bachelor of Fine Arts student, right out of graduation, I got a solo exhibition at the Midge Carr Fine Arts Gallery at New York Institute of Technology, the college, right, in Westbury. So, and that was really important. So it was, right, solo exhibition. The title of that I named it was In More Ways Than One. That was in italics, comma. Then I wrote Midge Carr Fine Arts Gallery on the campus of New York.
Yes.
That's enough. That's all. That speaks for itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did I lose you?
No, you're okay.
So that speaks for itself. Okay. So I hope that answers your question.
I think so. Does that answer your question, Mariah? I'm going to unmute your mic in case you need to follow up. Was that?
Oh, no, that was great. That answered my question. Yeah, thanks. I had, it's like some of the shows I have, they do have like these really funny names, but you know, maybe that's interesting to research.
It kind of makes them want to go look it up. I do the same thing Professor Giordano does. Yeah. And if something, like if a venue looks different to me, I immediately like, ooh, where is that? What's that? And then the other thing is if the opportunity looks different, again, ooh, I got to go, what is that? I want to see what it is. And then if an exhibition title is in there and it's, you know, really interesting, I'll go out of my way to go research it too and just figure it like, what's that? I got to see what that's about. So I think it's a great thing to add. And there's been a lot of resumes where I see it's missing, and so I think it's
that's good.
That's why.
There's a helicopter coming. Sorry.
Okay, I'll Thank you, Mariah.
Thank you. Yeah, because an interesting title can really work to your advantage.
For sure. Yeah, that would just get me more interested in finding out more about it.
Definitely.
Are there any other questions out there, guys? I'm gonna check our Facebook.
Okay.
Actually, I had one more question about, you know, I have like a whole group of like really nice, like a strong shows for like a period of time. And then I have a block like from like, I think it's from 2014 when I had my kids. I really didn't see it,
Yeah.
Everything kind of went away for a while. And then now I'm just kind of like emerging again as showing again.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you deal with, because some of those shows I had like group solo shows or 2-person shows in the city, but that was a very long time ago. And like the gallery, I looked up the gallery that I had a couple of shows at, and they're gone, and they're
right.
So I don't know what to do with that.
So, well, what you can do 2 different things, right? You can not explain yourself and don't feel like you have to explain yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you need that block of work because you don't have current work, include it, right? Include it. And here's the thing, then it's up to the person who is intrigued by you and who eventually asks you, why was there a break in your resume? I have had the same thing asked of me, because I too, like, I did a lot, and then I had children, and I went back to graduate school when my kids were little, and that's what I was doing. So I too have a break on my resume. And I have had people say to me, what were you doing during this time? And that was my answer. I was going to graduate school and I was raising my family. So wait, I can't hear. Can you put her back on? Oh, there you go. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, Mariah.
Oh, that's.
Is she on? Oh, sorry. Wait.
Oh, yes.
There you are. Sorry, Mariah. Sorry. Okay, you're there.
So, does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah, it does, because I want to include it because it's very important to me.
Yeah, I would include.
Yeah,
I would include it, especially like it kind of breaks that. It might break that 10-year rule, but you're only kind of getting back into it. You need that on your resume to show that you are a seasoned artist and you've been doing it for a while. And who's to say that like what I was going to say is, when I took a break from like making art and I was kind of really going back to graduate school for art history, I did teach at a small private art school. Like I taught ceramics, pottery, and painting. So even though there was a break in my resume, like on exhibitions, elsewhere on my resume, that gap was kind of made up for because it showed that I was teaching during that time and I was in graduate school. But so if there's anything that you've done during that time where maybe you were not exhibiting the work, but is art related, that's another category on your resume. You know what I mean? And again, that's up to me, the resume reviewer, to say, why does she have a gap? Oh, well, she was doing this during that time. Or ask you that question.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Do not let that discourage you from submitting your resume, because many of us have been in that situation as women. We raise children. Yeah. That's what a lot of us do. And if you're doing that, sometimes you can't be doing other things as well. So
Right.
I don't mean other things as well. I mean doing other things.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Good luck.
Helpful.
Thank you. That's a great question. Yeah. Daniel, I see your hand up. I'm going to unmute you so you can pop on.
Okay. Thanks. So I'm talking about my personal resume. The part where you said that the formats could be outdated and stuff. I just so far people have said good things, but like I'm hearing from you different, like that, the 2-column, my resume isn't like that. And I kind of went with what I thought would be clear.
Okay.
I'd have used I'm pretty sure I used 2 fonts in it for title of a section and and then the content. And I kind of sectioned it. I did use the section technique.
Okay.
All one stacked. And I've been working for a while, so I have 3 pages. I know.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Sure. The thing is, I've been getting positive responses to it. So like I'm not sure what to do, because I'm not just working as a teacher. I'm also exhibiting as well as curating events.
Mm-hmm.
It all kind of works together because the teaching artists, they expect some exhibition, and then the events shows a lot about who I am and what motivates my teaching. I don't know if this is like gonna like works into the package that you're talking about, like, and whether it put some people off, and I just got callbacks from the people who didn't put off, you know?
No, listen, if it's working, you're saying it's working for you. So
Yeah.
so you might have it formatted like I can relate to you because my resume, to shorten it to one page is almost impossible, because the same thing, like I teach at multiple institutions. I have museum work. I just got another job at a museum. I've also exhibited my work. So it's really hard for me to do the one page. If you're a new that's why I was really stressing, if you're a new artist, you might like the double column because it kind of takes up more space, right? It sounds like your format is a little bit more like a CV.
It
right?
is.
It's a CV is what
Well,
you're.
I've seen that news.
Oh, and it's
yeah.
like, so then there's your answer. Yeah.
And it looks like modern and fresh, and because I know she worked really hard on updating it, and so like I wouldn't get too hung up on like the column thing, because her resume looks beautiful, and it does need to incorporate so many different sections, and it's really easy to read, and it's like fun to read, and so it's not confusing. But I think that your resume is also like a different type of an example, because just from seeing other resumes that come in with people with similar experience and so much, it's not well organized and it's not easy to read. So I think like if you're sticking to those points, the easy to read, well organized, and it does have like a fresh feel to it. Like your resume does not look dated at all.
Color of turmeric. I love turmeric.
Yeah, that's the color, and it's great. It's bright. It's
nice.
It really much, actually very much exudes who Anu is, and like if you've met her and then you read her resume, it's a perfect reflection.
Right.
And if I read your resume before I met you, I would be that more excited to meet you, because the resume really is just like a really great example of an artist's resume. So
then you're probably doing everything like Beth is saying. You're doing everything because like Beth's saying, I've seen resumes too where it's so much information and it's not digestible. And I hear what you're saying, because I in February I just got a brand new job at a museum, and like I said, my resume is very long and there's a lot of different things on it as well, but I'm really careful as to like how I categorized everything. It sounds like that's what you've done.
Categorizing really helped.
You've almost curated everything that you've done.
Exactly.
I got a call back from MoMA for teaching.
It obviously worked.
Like for MoMA. So yeah, the thing what I did was my friend looked it over for me, who's in publishing, and she said what it did for her was you could look at it as much or as little as you wanted. Like she said that you have categories that if you wanted to just know what you were about in like 1 minute, you could look it up. And if you want to go deeper, you can look at it more.
Yeah.
But it's not following. I feel like I don't want to be out of date. You said it was like going to make you nauseous. Like
no.
No.
That's not the case, though. That's not the case.
No, and like I said, mine is really long too. But again, it sounds like you're doing everything I'm suggesting. You have the categories. You're really kind of carefully curated your resume. You don't have things just listed that are disjointed and are not running into each other. I mean, one of the interviews that I went on in January for a different job, I presented the same long resume, and I saw the person who was interviewing me, and she circled the sections on my resume that she wanted to speak about, and she had notes written. So I felt so confident, like, oh, I really broke everything down so clearly that she was able to kind of handpick what she wanted to speak about in the interview. And it sounds like that's what you've done. It sounds like you've really carefully broken everything down.
So
interactions.
thank you so much. That makes me feel like more secure, because when you were saying about, I know if something aesthetically, if we're artists, it's not pleasing or something, that could be a put off. But that's my teaching artist resume, and I left one as an exhibiting artist, which is basically category and list, and that is a long one. And I saw when I was looking up Sung's, Sung Lee's, I saw his work as a sample, like what Beth was talking about. Look at other people's resumes. Yeah. He's been, an exhibiting artist for so long. He had a huge resume for like 10 pages.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
So that exhibiting artist resume is 5 pages. But I've actually been working for 25 years. And I still have, I've shortened the other things in it, but the exhibitions are long in it.
Now, we had said that, right? We did say that if that, even like on your website, like you would want to keep all of that. Yeah.
So it is not selective though. You were talking about a resume that is selective, that you can select only a few of the shows like that you want to highlight. This is a bibliography resume. It's like what you were saying. I don't know if I need a third one. You
might want to have a short version. I mean, I did not have a short version for a long time. I only had my long resume, and I kind of felt like I needed to update it because I have applied to positions where they said resume 1 page only.
Right.
So that what you're talking about is something like more CV, like what we're saying, and that's acceptable. And and when you have that much, and if you when you have that much material and you have academic material, like someone at MoMA is going to know that this is like a CV that you're presenting because it's at MoMA and they're in that field, right? So, like I said, there are some jobs that I've applied to where they're like, only 1 page resume, and that's really challenging. It's really hard to edit things down. Like I've had to put things on the chopping block and be like, okay, I want to apply for this, I have to take these things off, and good for you that after 25 years you have that much material. Not everybody's in that situation, right? So they really have to kind of figure out how they're putting what they have together to look solid and to present something that's solid. Does that make sense?
Okay, that gives me more confidence. And also another job to do is to have that curated, a shorter resume. I think that would look much better too, because I have some shows in there that I felt back when I was writing resumes and learning about it, now it feels like during the times of the pyramids.
Yeah.
They were like, you can't skip over this. That was one thing that I see differently, right? They would say, oh, you have to put every job you did down, even if you did it for 6 months or something.
But 25 years later, that's really maybe not.
You don't need that anymore. You don't need that anymore.
No, I'm definitely doing like more like 10. I am doing like 10 years, but like I'm saying, let's say 2 years ago I did something for 6 months, but it's not the best or whatever for like what represents me.
Mm-hmm.
I can take it out. Like
leave out whatever you want to leave out.
Because they used to say you have to show that you did it anyway. Because I used to get that advice for resumes. Not that it was complimentary, but they're like, you can't just take out something that you did. You need to put in everything that you did to show what, like if you were. Yeah, so I think it was a different philosophy behind the resume that I was learning. So,
but I also do think when you're starting out, you do want to include everything. You know what I mean?
Get everything in there.
Trying to get everything in, but as you develop and you have more experiences, like you're reminding me, like when I graduated, I did trade shows like at the Javits Center, and I went in and I did like window design displays, and I set up all of these, and it was a really creative opportunity, and I loved it, and it was great. And I had that on my resume for a while, because they were really fun, and they were good, and they were good names that I worked for. I don't have that on my resume anymore. I just don't. It just doesn't apply, I guess.
We're allowed to cherry pick now, and it's okay.
Yeah, you're curating.
Sure.
Your
Showcase yourself. Yeah.
It's curating.
You're curating your resume.
That's a great permission to have, because then it could give a nice, stronger impression of what I'm going for.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, that's what you want to do.
If
Thanks
you're
so much.
in an interview and those other experiences creep up, like
Right.
if we're in an interview and all of a sudden it became, you were talking about visual merchandising or
Right.
how those skills would be needed, you'd be like, oh, I used to blah blah blah,
Right.
and that's a way, if they're needed, you can talk about them.
That's
Right.
like
Still your experiences.
my children's theater experience pops up every now and then. It's like, yeah, I was a children's theater person.
Yeah, right?
Like kind of, bulks it up in the interview. So, okay.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
It's good. Thank you so much, because I feel confident about what I have, and I think it frees me for another type of resume that I can do that might make me look even stronger for other jobs.
Yeah, I mean, just as one more side note, like I have a friend who's a graphic designer, and she's also an adjunct professor, and we give each other our resumes back and forth, and she felt that she wasn't getting graphic designer positions and she's so much experience, and we redid her entire resume, and then she gave me tips on mine, and a lot of it was also just condensing it and cutting it down, and she has so much experience, but by eliminating some of the other things, made some of those really big names stand out even more, so.
That's great.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That was a great question, Anu.
Yeah, that was.
Thank you.
And we're kind of at the end here, but if anybody has any last questions, now's the time to throw them out there. I'm going to check Facebook one more time.
More?
But I think we've gotten everybody's questions. Yes, we've got everybody on Facebook. And has everybody here, does anybody have any last questions, or should we just thank Professor Giordano for everything today? We'll give you a minute to think about it. And while we give them that minute, I have one question to ask you, which is about, I've seen this a couple times, so maybe you can just talk about how you feel about this, if it still stands to be professional. But, and it kind of goes back to what Anu was talking about, having like an extensively long list of exhibitions and things like that. I will see often on the bottom, please ask for extensive exhibition history or whatever. Yeah. And I still think it's a good idea. Do you still see that? Do you think it's a good idea?
I do. And I think, again, a lot of it is like I said, I've seen a lot of specifications where if it's like 1-page resume, then you absolutely want to include that. You definitely want to include or make a point of noting that there's more to come, but this is what you've included here. So I think so.
Oh, that's good. I do it on mine, so
I think you should, because again, I know we're full for every opportunity that we get, but now is your time to brag. Like, this is what I've done. Like, this is your moment to show how you stand apart from somebody else.
Yeah, that's perfect. That was a great way to end today too.
Yeah.
I just want to take another opportunity to thank Professor Giordano for doing this for us. These videos have been a real hit, and they've helped a lot of artists already, and we know that they're going to help a lot more. So thank you so much for taking the time to put them together and to be with us for question and answer time.
My pleasure. I hope they helped. Good luck to everybody.
And thank you all for joining us today. And I just want to remind you that there's lots of opportunities coming out from the Patchogue Arts Council. So be sure to check on our Facebook and our website as well. We have a couple different open calls that will be going out that haven't been listed yet. And we have one that has a deadline for our membership that is actually in 2 days. So get on it if you didn't get there yet. You're going to need some of these things for that application. And that's it for today. So thanks again for joining us.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.